Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to our cozy little corner of the internet. I'm Ben and today I'll be reading Sleepless Nostalgia by LitaCakes. Yes, this is another LitaCakes story and this one is only a one-shot, but I love it so much. It's quite new, so not new, but it's not very popular. So I'm going to leave the link down below in the description. Please kudos it, read it, this fic is amazing. Anyway, here is the summary. A message popped up on the corner on the app, or the school chat app, in the corner of his screen. It was a private message from Nezu. Nezu, they're safe, Shota. Shota let out a huff of shock and shook his head. Of course the damn chimera would be watching him through the cameras. He probably gets alerts from when the teachers log onto the security system, or maybe he just tracks their computer activity on the staff laptops. Shota has no confirmation of this, but he didn't put any effort into anything past that damn rodent. He loved Nezu for his vigilance. They both knew they wouldn't be sleeping anytime soon. Or, Shota can't sleep, so he checks on the school cameras and ends up rewatching some old footage from his time at UA when Oboro was still alive. Now, there is a little bit of angst to this, and of course because Oboro is here, there will be mentions of death. So if any of that triggers you, please click off now for your own protection. But it isn't anything too bad, it's just mentions of Oboro dying. And anyway, yeah, I won't spoil too much, but please be careful, and I'll see you guys right in the fic. Shota's eyes searched the ceiling of his apartment bedroom. He stopped counting how many sleepless nights had led him to know exactly how many imperfections in the ceiling paint laid. He really should take a weekend to paint over the damn thing, so he would stop darting his eyes over every imperfection in some vain attempt to count sheep. It never worked. Groaning, he tossed his sheets aside and climbed out of the bed. His Ashi was still asleep next to him. The shift in weight shouldn't wake him, and with the man's hearing aids being on the bedside table, he wouldn't notice Shota leaving until he woke up. The exhausted hero was often up and down during the nights he wasn't on patrol, and his husband had learned to sleep through it all. Something rubbed against his leg, disturbing him from his thoughts and of his beautiful husband, and drawing his attention to the ground. But all but the bright green eyes of his infamous black cat bled into the darkness of the room. He sighed and picked up the feline. Can't sleep either, bastard. The cat chirped at him and curled in his arms, with its head tucked into his neck. Bastard was a grumpy old feline that he had found during high school. They didn't know his age, but the vet assumed he was around 16 now, and Shota had found him when he was about a year old in his second year at UA. Bastard knew all his secrets, and he kept them all these years. All the wounds he'd never told his husband about, the drunken nights he couldn't bear the violence and grief of underground heroics, and all the tears and screams. Bastard had seen it all, and despite his grumbling, he was always by Shota's side. Shuffling along the carpet, Shota made his way to the living room and decided a cup of coffee was the first step in preventing a sleepless hangover in the morning. Just like drinking, if one never stopped being caffeinated, one would never get tired. Coffee was now his alcohol. He tried to not think about all the nights he used to spend in bars at the end of patrols, or during patrols, or before patrols. Shota sighed to himself and flipped the switch atop the coffee maker. He set Bastard down on the counter so he could get a can of cat food for the feline and a bag of crackers for himself. He'd prefer a meal replacement Jello packet, but he wasn't sure how his stomach could handle that with only caffeine to soothe his stomach acid. The coffee pot dinged after a few minutes. He paid extra for a super fast pot. The coffee was bitter, but that's how he liked it. Bastard wasn't interested in food, instead clinging to him when he moved. Shota grabbed a mug, pouring himself a cup. He took his crackers to the computer and set them up took his crackers to the computer desk that they had set up in the living room, with Bastard now on his heels. In the dark, he fumbled for the purchase on the desk and nearly lost the whole box of crackers to the void of the living room, but he caught himself. Meow? Bastard tilted his head, neon green eyes aglow in the dim light that was coming from the streetlights outside of the kitchen window. Schroeder chuckled to himself. One more secret that damn cat kept for him. For that damn cat to keep for him. Schroeder reached out to give the feline a head scratch, much to Bastard's satisfaction. I should check on the students, huh? He asked. The cat purred loudly, clearly a confirmation of Schroeder's concerns. Even years into his job, he still worries for the safety of the students in the school. It didn't matter that it was 15 years since the last horrible incident on campus, or that there had several more safety precautions in place to prevent that from ever happening again. It didn't matter that Nezu slept just about as much as Schroeder and was often watching the security cameras like him. Schroeder was a perpetual warrior, and he didn't see that stopping anytime soon. Each new class of students brought new panic, and this class had a special place in Schroeder's heart. It was, of course, something he'd never admit aloud, but Bastard would know, and that's all that really counted. The chair squeaked as he collapsed into it, Bastard immediately curling up on his lap and stretched himself out like Schroeder was his couch. Coffee mug in hand and crackers at the ready, he opened his laptop and pulled up the school's security system and checked the cameras. It was important to note that Schroeder had a system when checking the cameras. First, he checked the entrances, all of them, and there were a lot. Second, he checked the school building itself, and that usually took the bulk of his walkthrough, as there were dozens of cameras in the building, most of which people didn't even know about. Third, he checked the outside cameras around campus to ensure that no one was sneaking around, intruder or student. After that, he checked on his students and all the cameras inside of the 1A dorms. This whole routine took about 30 minutes to get through if he was being quick. Today, he spent a little extra time on the dorm cameras. Sleepless nights always made him anxious. Once he was satisfied that his students were safe, he swapped back to the main screen and rotated through the cameras with at least a dozen up at once and let it roll while he munched on crackers and sipped his coffee. Bastard yawned, resettling himself and falling asleep, purring on his lap. Schroeder mostly ignored the cat while his attention was focused on the school. A message popped up on the school chat app in the corner of his screen. It was a private message from Nezu. Nezu, they're safe, Schroeder. Schroeder half laughed and shook his head. Of course, the damn chimera could see him watching the cameras. He probably gets alerts when teachers log onto the security system, or maybe he just tracks their computer activity on staff laptops. Schroeder had no confirmation in this, but he wouldn't put anything past that damn rodent. He loved Nezu for all his vigilance. I know, Schroeder said. Schroeder, I know, Nezu, but you still worry. Schroeder, I still worry. Nezu, try and get some sleep when you can. Schroeder, you too. They both know they wouldn't be sleeping anytime soon. Nezu's quirk often left him too boggled by math equations and physics puzzles to sleep, and Schroeder had been a lifetime insomniac that struggled with anxiety and PTSD. That's what his therapist would say, at least. He took a long pull from his coffee mug and slouched in the chair a little, watching the darkening sky in the cameras. Sunrise wasn't too far away. He knew Nezha was watching now, so maybe he should just go to sleep. There was something sort of freaky knowing that the Chimera was there, observing his actions on the computer and security system, but instead Shota put his coffee cup down and hovered the mouse over the archive folder in the security system. They kept all footage in the archive of previous incidents, or rather, all past incidents on the campus, no matter what the type. If something happens that shouldn't have happened, it was on campus, it was recorded, it will be archived. Shota was well aware what was in this folder. He re-watched every single video in that folder at least once a month. It wasn't out of morbid curiosity or fascination. For the most part, he wanted to remind himself that he had a responsibility to the students. The teachers were the front line of safety, and when they failed, it was their duty to make sure that it never happened again. So, Shota reminded himself of their failings, his failings. He reminded himself so he'd do better than those who came before him. Clicking onto the archive, Shota braced himself for the onslaught of memories he knew would come. Izuku Midoriya had his own subfolder, but that wasn't what Shota was here to look for today. No, he wasn't here to look at any accidents or injuries he'd personally failed to prevent. Tonight he was here to look into the past. The archive folder was labeled Shirakumo. Shota had found his hand freezing over the mouse, unable to click at first. The incident happened during their third year. They were so close to graduating, so close to becoming heroes. There was no logistical reasons for Shota to watch this specific video. It wouldn't help him prevent future failings. This was an accident, pure and simple, and it wasn't anyone's fault. But Shota still blamed himself. Swallowing the bile rising up in his throat, Shota clicked play. That was crazy! Hisashi stretched both his arms above his head. Did you see that? I blew the villain right out the water. I'm really getting the hang of controlled bursts. Yeah. Shota rubbed the side of his head and brushed some debris out of his hair. The building they had just pulled themselves out of was one of the mock office complexes on the training grounds. They were paired up and asked to complete search and rescue under earthquake conditions. Shota personally believed that it was illogical for them to throw themselves into a building already falling down, but he also wanted to save lives, so he went in reluctantly. Hisashi suddenly tackled him from behind, his arms tucked over Shota's shoulders as they stared at the shaking, crumbling building. Most of the class was still inside. Hisashi had made quick work of a mock villain, and Shota lowered them out the window with his capture scarf, and after they grabbed their civilian dummy. They were the third group to finish. The rest of the class was slowly getting out one by one. They watched students filtering out group by group as the building started to crumble further with each passing second. When the concrete and plaster cracked loudly, loud chunks crashing to the floor, his feet were moving without his permission. The whole building was suddenly coming down, but there were still students inside. Hisashi was running after him, calling his name, asking what the hell he was doing, but he ignored it and pushed on. The building was miles away, and yet inches from his face at the same time. Dust pummeled out of the lowest floors as the middling floors hit the ground. The wave nearly knocked him off his feet. He couldn't see, he couldn't breathe. Oboro, he cried. Shirakumo. Just as he made it to the base of the building, tons of concrete came toppling over the side. It shook the ground hard enough to actually make Shota bring Shota to his knees this time. He was coughing through the dust and debris, but he was running a moment later, after tying his capture scarf around his face. Something wasn't right. The building shouldn't have come down like that. There shouldn't have been a complete collapse. Not while there were students inside. This was supposed to be training. His feet scrunched over the broken drywall and cement, slipping and tripping as he clambered through the rubble. He cut his hands, smacked his face on stray boards, but he simply didn't care about his own wounds. Oboro, he called again, coughing the name from his clogged lungs. A groan echoed from nearby, somewhere buried in the rubble. Oboro, I'm here. Schroeder nearly lost his footing again as he tried to scurry through the tumbled rock and half-hung walls. There was glass everywhere, but he didn't care. He didn't care if it left scars on his hands and knees. He had to crawl through it all just to get to his friend. Schroeder! His Archie's voice was close, but it was still on the other side of the rubble. I found him, he called back. I'm coming. They called for emergency services. Just get recovery girl. Schroeder shoved a large chunk of brick out the way and pushed himself under the collapsed second floor to get through the mess. He could hear groans of his friends, agonizing cries of pain that would likely be trapped in his mind for the rest of his life. Oboro, Schroeder shouted again. The teen's voice was cut off by a hacking cough. His words were practically wheezing. Schroeder moved faster. Hey, I'm right here. Slicing his hand open on another harshly shattered piece of concrete, he got the rubble out of the way and finally got to Oboro. But the moment he saw his friend, his body froze. Laying on the ground across a wide pile of rubble was Oboro Shirakumo. The whole building was resting on top of him. One of the main pillars from the entryway had crumbled in on itself, making a large cylinder become a giant crumpled block. The shards were impaling Oboro in several places. His legs were buried under large chunks of the building, along with the right half of his upper body. The only thing visible was his head and left arm. Schroeder knew without any doubts his friend wouldn't survive this. There was no healing quirk that could fix this kind of damage. The puddle of blood around him was already too big. The concrete had practically severed him in half. Hot tears were already streaming down Schroeder's face. Because he couldn't fix this, he couldn't stop it. He couldn't save his best friend. He couldn't save Oboro. The injured teen coughed again, making a splatter of blood arch across the ground between the two of them. His voice finally got Schroeder to move again. Hey. Schroeder scooted himself across the rubble and took his friend's one free arm and ripped his scarf. Once he ripped his scarf over his face. I'm right here. Off of his face. There we go. I'm right here, okay? Recovery girl is on her way. Oboro hacked up what might be a laugh. Always the jokes are. He must have realized his situation and thought what Schroeder said was funny. Yeah. Oboro squeezed his hand and Schroeder could feel how weak he was. Do me a favor, Schroeder. You can do it yourself when we get out of here. Shut up. Schroeder looked away. He was insulting Oboro by pretending there was a way out of this, so he obeyed. He shut up. The grip on his hand was getting weaker. He gripped his friend's hand tighter. Oboro's breathing was wet and raspy. Punctured lungs, Schroeder told himself. Punctured or crushed. Stop pretending you aren't in love with him. Schroeder blinked a few times and shook his head. Oboro, I don't. For someone who doesn't, he coughed. talk that much. You really need to shut up. Shoto tried to hold back a wet laugh that bubbled out of his chest, but it came out anyway. Oboro squeezed his hand again, weaker still. He loves you too, you tired bastard. That's what Oboro called him, tired bastard. After Shoto found that stupid black cat on the street last year and named it bastard, Oboro called them a pair. His tired pair bastards. Hey, Oboro pulled his attention back to the present. I love you too. That's what finally shattered Shoto's heart. A gasping sob echoed off the concrete walls and around them, and it wasn't coming from Oboro's choked lungs, it was from Shoto. His body collapsed against his friend's chest and neck, hugging as much of his body as he could while under the rubble. Blood had soaked his knees a while ago. He was clutching a boy on borrowed time, precious seconds that wouldn't last. He felt like his hands were clutching the sands of time itself and begging for one more grain, just one more. Please, Shoto begged. Please don't leave me. Sorry, Oboro whispered. Go be a hero. I'll catch up. Promise. Shoto pressed his fingers to the laptop screen as he watched himself, Hisashi, and Oboro laughing on the school roof while eating lunch. Oboro was lounging on a cloud, not a care in the world, staring up at the sky like it held every answer to every question he could ever think of. Maybe it did. Maybe Shoto should look at the clouds more often. There wasn't a day that goes by that Shoto didn't think about his best friend. There isn't a day since his death where Shoto didn't miss him, but he'd done what Oboro had asked of him. He became a hero, and he was doing his best to make sure the kids he cared for grew up to be heroes too. Shoto wiped a few stray tears from his face. He pressed a kiss to his fingers and touched the screen again, saying goodbye like he had done several times over the last 15 years. They were just kids, laughing their way through lunch breaks, sneaking up onto the rooftops and naming the clouds their friend could make. Hisashi would sing with his beautiful voice, and Shoto would feed the stray cats that flocked around him. They all had such bright futures, but in an instant one was snuffed out by a piece of a misplaced rebar. One piece of misplaced rebar. Sometimes, Shoto wondered if he chose the right path in life. He loved his job and his students, but being a hero had taken so much out of him. Shoto didn't regret becoming a hero. He just wished his best friend could have joined them. The sleepy voice of his husband called out his name from the hallway. Shoto quickly wiped the last of his tears and closed the security system. Hey love, sorry, did I wake you? He was signing as he spoke, since Zashi didn't have his hearing aids in just yet. His voice was more muddled, but clear enough despite the exhaustion. Hisashi shook his head. Where'd you go? Shoto carefully placed Bastard on the desk and held his arms open for his husband. The blonde settled into his lap and curled up around his neck. His face was turned just enough to watch Shoto shine if necessary. I couldn't sleep. You were lost in the past again? Shoto nodded. He didn't necessarily hide the fact that he was watching old security footage from his beloved partner, but he didn't outwardly say what footage he watched. Hisashi reached out to and tapped a couple of keys on the keyboard on the laptop that pulled up the security system that Shoto had just closed. Shoto. Hisashi hugged him tighter. It's okay to visit the past, but please don't hurt yourself. The tired hero sighed. Shoto might be the more logical one, but Hisashi had always been the soft-hearted side of their relationship. Zashi often called himself a sentimental fool, but Shoto knew he just had a huge bleeding heart that he wore on his damn sleeve. Shota buried his face in Hizashi's shoulder and hair, taking a big breath of fresh mint, Zashi's shampoo. He missed the way Oboro used to smell like the sky after it rained. He missed the ever-present light foggy coolness that surrounded him everywhere he went. I miss him, Shota admitted, his left hand signing the 3 simple words slowly and painfully. He signed, sorry, against his chest when his voice began to fail him. Oh, Sho. Zashi cupped his face and pressed their cheeks together. I miss him too, but it's not fair to keep hurting yourself like this. It wasn't your fault, Shota. It wasn't your fault. Shota closed his eyes and nuzzled his husband's face. They had this talk every few months. No matter how many times Hizashi had reminded him that it wasn't his fault, Shota still blamed himself. He knew it wasn't his fault, but he still blamed himself for the stupid little things he couldn't change. Like how he could have picked Oboro instead of Hizashi to be his training partner, but then Hizashi would be dead and he hated himself for thinking of it. Or how he could have walked downstairs instead of going out the window, and maybe he could have pulled Oboro out of the building, but then they'd likely all be dead. Around and around, he tried to find a solution to a problem that was already resolved. It would never change anything, but he desperately wished it would. Hizashi pulled up the video of their lunch break on the roof while he was distracted and put one of his hearing aids in so he could curl up into Shota's arms and watch the past unfold like it was yesterday. You never told me what he said to you under that building. Shota kissed the back of Hizashi's neck. He never voiced those words out loud, not in 15 years, but maybe it was time. Maybe he was ready to stop hurting himself like Zashi had said. He said, go be a hero, I'll catch up, I promise. Hizashi rubbed his eyes and chuckled a little. Maybe he will someday. Shota smiled, the sun rising over the horizon, covering the living room in a warm glow and clear skies. Shota took a deep breath and tipped his head back to let the warm morning sunlight stream across his face. Every time I see the sun and I see bright blue skies, I see his face. I hear his voice in the back of my head telling me to keep going, that he's right behind me. Hizashi kissed his lips softly, his fingers sinking into Shota's hair. His eyes slid closed as his husband pressed a little peck along his chin and neck. It's his fault, you know. Huh? Hizashi paused. Under that building, he asked me to do one favor. Shota cracked open her eyes and eye, watching its husband's eyes widen in surprise. He told me to stop pretending I didn't love you, so I did. It's his fault that we're married. Hizashi's face spread into a wide smile, and he dove at Shota, nearly knocking the chair backwards as they kissed sweetly. Hizashi cupped his chin so hard his head was almost over the back of the chair. Shota couldn't stop the giant smile he wore between their kisses. Maybe he never left, Hizashi suggested. And maybe you should get some sleep. Yeah, it's time to get some sleep. Okay, everyone, that was that was the one-shot. Sleepless Nostalgia. I hope you guys like this, and as I said at the start, go and check out this fic, give kudos, give your comments, share how much you love this story like I did, because it's a really underrated story and it deserves to be seen and heard more. Anyway, make sure to take care of yourself, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!